My name is Van Clark, and I am the APA Utah Student Liaison, and had the opportunity to invite Justin here to speak with us today. Thank you for attending. We are so happy to have you all here. The mission of the speaker series is to engage with leaders in the allied design professions. We are proud of our students, faculty, and facilities, and wish to demonstrate our hospitality to our guest speakers for whom we are grateful. These talks are recorded for posterity, for use in studios and the greater community. We ask you to be engaged during the talks, to listen, to quietly take notes, avoid digital distraction, and stay for the entire 1 hour duration. A short Q&A will follow the talk, after which you can scan the QR code for attendance, and then we will meet in the common studio for a follow-up reception with some refreshments. We are so excited to welcome you all to today's speaker series, and even more honored to be joined by our guest, Justin Garrett Moore. Justin is here as our designated planning lecturer for the 2025 to 26 school year. I know a few of us have had the chance to have Justin visit our studio earlier today, and we're all looking forward to hearing more from him in just a few moments. But before we get to that, Justin earned his Bachelor of Design from the University of Florida and both his Master of Architecture and Master of Science in Urban Design from Columbia University, where he now serves as Adjunct Associate Professor in the School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. Over the course of more than 15 years in public service with New York City, Justin has made a remarkable impact. First as an urban designer and city planner for over a decade, and later as executive director of the New York City Public Design Commission. Beyond his extensive work with New York City, Justin has also served as a board member for the Black Space Urbanist Collective, a commissioner for the American Planning Association, co-founder of Urban Patch, and a lecturer at both Columbia and Yale universities. For the past 5 years, he has worked with the Mellon Foundation as program director for their Humanities in Place program, advancing equity, inclusion, and social justice through cultural and built environment initiatives. In 2021, he received the American Academy of Arts and Letters Award in Architecture and was appointed to the U.S. Commission of Fine Arts by President Joe Biden. It's evident from this impressive record of public service, though by no means exhaustive, that Justin embodies the qualities of leadership, candor, diligence, and care. Over lunch, I also learned that he started working at an architecture firm when he was just 14, so I think we can safely add tenure to that list. The passion Justin brings to his work is palpable, and I can't wait to see how this translates into his presentation today. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Justin Garrett Moore.
Great. Thank you, Van and Deandra. I did look it up, and it was May 2024 when you first reached out. So it's been a while coming, but really happy to be here in Logan and in Utah to share some work with you. So, this is a planning lecture, and I call myself kind of a transdisciplinary designer. I started out in architecture, migrated to urban design, migrated into urban planning, and now I'm sort of a curious platypus or something that works in different sectors, and I now work in philanthropy at the Mellon Foundation. So I wanted to share some of the work that I've been doing at the foundation with you all, but just for point of background, the Mellon Foundation is the nation's largest funder of the arts, culture, and humanities. It's essentially an $8 billion pool of money that is invested in smart ways, and it spends off about $500 million a year that we spend on different projects across the country. So the program that I was selected to lead is called Humanities in Place, and it was a program that was created by the foundation to bring the important work of acknowledging our nation's history, heritage, and culture to places directly. So not necessarily in the museum or the library or the university, but how that work happens in places and communities. And so, my entry was mentioned by Van a bit in the background. I worked in public service for a long time. I worked in the city of New York on community plans, on housing development projects, on parks, infrastructure, landscapes, all these different types of projects that had really complex processes and sort of parameters around how we are constantly doing the work of changing our places, right? Humans are strange creatures. We basically are terraforming, constantly rechanging and shaping the earth for our purposes. And it takes a lot of different layers of work. Some of that is practical and technical, but some of it is cultural. Some of it is connected to history and connected to our ideas and kind of beliefs about space. And so Mellon really acknowledged that and wanted to create a program that would focus on that important work of people being able to kind of shape their spaces in different ways. So the title of this lecture was in Shaping Spaces, and that's really the mandate of our work. So this image here is just one quick sample. It's from an organization called Harlem Grown. I live in New York City, and I live in Harlem specifically. And Harlem Grown is kind of an unusual organization. They do community gardens, farms, health programs around nutrition, things of that nature, but they wanted to create some spaces in Marcus Garvey Park. It's a park in central Harlem. And so they work with designers to literally create spaces in the park that sometimes had challenges. They were kind of not well maintained, not so great activities. Created these spaces that could be culture or community. And there's everything from cooking classes to jazz performances, like are shown here, or even just people kind of sharing and educating one another about the history of the community. So this is an infrastructure of design work that's thinking about place in interesting ways. So in this presentation, I'm going to share a few different example projects to give you sort of a spectrum of work that we do, but hopefully it kind of tap into some of your interests in landscape architecture, environmental design, planning, et cetera, in this work. But to start, our program has this unusual name, Humanities in Place. What is that? We were like, we don't know either. And so we asked people that we give funding to what they thought it meant to have humanities in place. And this was their definition. Learn and connect with place, knowledge, art, culture, history, and most importantly, each other. And this idea of our connections to one another in place is an important kind of part of our work and analysis. I just was meeting with the site analysis class, so there's a dimension of hydrology, environment, things that are kind of physical and of the earth, but there are also things that are social and cultural that also need to be understood. And so much of that is literally our ability to connect and relate and understand one another in order to have a positive environment. So in our work in a foundation, the way it works, we're kind of like the opposite of a bank. We're like a bank, but we give away the money, right? And so we're kind of constantly evaluating how do we make good investments and decisions. So we do that through different approaches. So our program, which has this built environment and public focus, has 3 strategies or approaches to this. The first, keep and shape our places, is what I'm going to focus on in this lecture. But we also have 2 others, one called supporting and sustaining institutions. This is the idea that it's great to make something or create something, but it's more important to keep it. And if you are in this sort of built environment space, a lot of times people will spend a lot of money building something, but then not so much thought is put into like how it's maintained over time. And so we actively engage in the work of making sure that spaces and institutions can be sustained. And then the third is really about kind of a civic conversation. We call it promoting greater engagement and understanding. This is the idea that when you have a public space or a city or a community, that it's actually really important for that work of human connection to happen. And so that people can understand their differences, understand what they have in common, and kind of work together in dialogue to have more understanding, to have good decision making and good outcomes and experiences for people in spaces. So as I mentioned, this lecture is really focused on this first strategy, keep and shape our places. So, a foundation hired an architect and urban designer and planner to run these programs because of the power of space. Space is an infrastructure for so many different things in our world and societies, and it's important that that be a kind of a tool for our work. So the first example I'll give is a place called the August Wilson House. And this was one of the very first projects that we supported. And so the gentleman here is a renowned American playwright, August Wilson. And this is him at his home or former home in Pittsburgh's Hill District, which is a predominantly African-American community that had seen a lot of the challenges that Black communities in the U.S. had seen, redlining, a lot of disinvestment and conditions like this. And so Wilson, this is in about 1999, he went back, he's a world famous playwright, he went back and he really wanted to recreate and reshape this space because this was the space that actually inspired His entire body of work was that community that he was from. And he once stated that my plays insist that we should not forget or toss away our history. And so he was very much grounded in the power of history in any place. And just, think of, from your own life experience, what's an important place to you and why is it special or what makes it unique. That's something that is kind of a collective work as well, and it was something that Wilson was promoting. And so the project that we supported here, that was sort of the before image. The after image, he passed, and a lot of people were really motivated by his work, and people in that Hill District community got together and reimagined, redesigned, and recreated this space. So he was famous for depicting the American backyard life in many of his plays. And so this is work by Walter Hood, it's a MacArthur Genius-winning landscape architect that redesigned this backyard landscape of August Wilson's former home. So our foundation provided $750,000 to sort of build out this space and also renovate some of the adjacent vacant properties to be residencies for playwrights. And so here you could see the sort of the redesign of this space and landscape, which is just sort of a former vacant urban lot that's actually been redesigned, reconfigured as an accessible play landscape and kind of audience. So they actually have residences come stay, they'll write plays, they'll workshop them literally in August Wilson's backyard. It's like an incredibly powerful space for those artists and really kind of our collective American culture in this space, but also for people that live in that Hill District community have access to this incredibly powerful work and looking at the power of the arts in making space. And so it's an important kind of investment for us, and it's about the idea of what is the American story, what's the American experience, but how is that literally made into a space. And we support built projects like this because it's looking at the idea that social justice or that kind of going into communities that had seen challenges are worthy of investment and repair, and that they can create what are really beautiful things that contribute to kind of all of our culture, and it's really a good example of what we mean by humanities in place. So in our work, we understand that place is more than just kind of geographic location. It's a concept that is linked to our language, our culture, our history, but also to our art, to natural and environmental landscapes, and to our different forms of knowledge production. So places can inform rituals and daily practices, but they also can help provide a foundation for individual and shared identity. So urbanist Robert Beauregard noted that all sites exist first as places. They exist in personal experience, in hearsay, and in collective memories. And while place narratives can often be ignored, they cannot be wholly erased. Places are never empty, right? So those who did the site analysis class, right? The idea you go to a place, there's so many different layers of information there that can be sort of captured and understood and sort of analyzed. And so for thinking about a lot of places that we work where maybe these sort of stories and layers of information and knowledge have been either lost, threatened, or even neglected, the work of what we call place keeping is really vital in these contexts in particular. And so it's an opportunity to not only kind of find and identify these spaces, but to think about what the future might be and how to kind of repair and reimagine some of these spaces for a better future. So this is a field on St. Helena Island in the South Carolina Lowcountry, in what's kind of known as the Gullah Geechee corridor as an example. And so it has really generations of history that bridge indigenous, colonial, American, and Black Atlantic identities, because it was an area that was significantly marked by histories of enslavement in the US. But from the ground up, this is a place where there's a lot of kind of pride and joy in the history of that space. And so one group that we've supported there is called the Maloma Heritage Center, and this is a group that is looking at the culture of that Gullah Geechee region, which is known for its food, its clothing, its art and heritage. And so there's a group of people that were able to acquire 40 acres of land on St. Helena Island, so it's one of the islands in the Gullah Coast. And they're really thinking about the deep histories of that site and how they'll recover it. And the way that they're recovering it is that it's a group of chefs. So there are people that are deeply tied to the culinary history of the Gullah Coast region, and they work together and they do cooking classes and cultural exchanges for people to take something that's really loved and honored about that culture, which is food. Everybody loves food. And then bringing it together and finding ways to invest in the place and the people in that way. Another example, going to San Antonio, and we work nationally, so this is going to be a medley of America for you all. So in San Antonio in 1987, there was a group called the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center that's worked around educating community members to celebrate, document, preserve, and promote the culture, the significance of San Antonio's West Side barrio, which is the historically Mexican-American, Latinx community of the city. And so they've been focused on historic preservation, education, arts, and storytelling for many years, and their programs are really grounded in sort of a community-based approach to that work. So they do oral history gatherings, work with public schools, and they even have a women's clay cooperative doing kind of traditional arts, ceramic arts in that community and providing spaces for that. And so a number of years ago, they started working on a project that they called the Museo del West Side. So it was a museum of their neighborhood, of their community. And so they got these sort of old buildings that were in the neighborhood that had been, in disrepair and vacant, and started a project to revitalize that as a center for culture. So we provided a $1.6 million grant to this organization to redevelop that space as a museum. But something that was really interesting when they were doing that work is that they were really conscious of, I mentioned that idea about maintenance, like how do you keep something? So they built the museum, but when they were building it, they worked with people in the neighborhood to actually teach the construction trades and skills and things, so that after the museum was built, that there would be people in the community that knew how to kind of maintain it and keep it nice over time. And so it's a way that's like a very intentional practice of connecting people to literally building that space so that there's more connection to it and more investment in that space long term. But also doing things in intentional ways, like making sure that women were involved in those construction projects as well, and gaining the skills and experiences as well. But also, of course, working with designers, in doing that work to think imaginatively about what the next step and how to be creative in that work. And the idea is that these are spaces that are participatory, that again are helping kind of people connect to one another. There are different waves of communities that have lived in that neighborhood, longtime residents, newcomers of lots of different backgrounds. And this is a space that they can also have kind of a future together that's not only about kind of documenting the past. Another powerful example, and one of my favorites, is a project called Egan Yifilija. And this is a over 2,000 acre eco-village by the indigenous Muskogee Creek descendants in what is now known as Alabama, but the Muskogee people were from that region originally. U.S. history, Trail of Tears, they got moved to Oklahoma, Kansas, etc. In time, the native-speaking Muskogee people east of the Mississippi, there were only 20 remaining. And so a group of people from the Kansas Muskogee tribe decided to rematriate to their original homeland and build a space where they would be able to keep their original language. So that's the original kind of premise of this project, was to go back to the homelands and to have a space where their language and culture that had been spoken there for thousands of years could be maintained. But the way that they're doing that work is actually through kind of sustainable design and a sense of understanding nature and ecology in that space. So they've been taking this land that had been sort of over generations turned into like kind of forestry land and lots of not great uses, and returning the original species, including down to the buffalo and the sturgeon, all the different kind of plant life. And so they're kind of reforming this sort of 2,000 acres of land. But then whenever they're building with either zero or negative carbon building practices that are done and built by people in the community directly, and thinking about how to have more symbiotic and kind of natural relationships with the land. And so our funding to this is to sort of build out additional sites, which will include the language school, for the Muskogee, but also spaces that will allow people to come and residency sort of get connected to natural and sustainable and low carbon building practices and landscape practices as well. But importantly, this work is also looking at, as I mentioned, the language, and so something that could be easily lost within a generation or two without having this space as an infrastructure is something that they're intentional about. So we did our site visits there and there for 3 days. 3 days hearing only Muskogee language, right? And just being in a space in Alabama and with this kind of multi-generational dynamic was really kind of powerful and beautiful as well. And so we think about how place, heritage, culture are kind of undergirding our work, but it's also interesting and important to kind of think about how imagination, creativity, kind of future orientation, design tools, planning tools can be kind of a part of that work as well. Very different example is a place called the Sweetwater Foundation that we've supported. This is in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago. So this is a kind of predominantly Black disinvested community on the south side. And so some of you may be familiar with this, and it's not a Black community thing, it's an American community thing. Churches as an infrastructure is kind of shifted over time. So you had typically like smaller churches, it would be really neighborhood scale. Things have shifted at bigger and bigger churches. So there are all these like old church buildings all over the south side of Chicago that aren't used. And so this group, Sweetwater Foundation, they have a Commonwealth project, what they call a Commonwealth project, which is getting all these kind of vacant spaces in their neighborhood and transforming those into different types of spaces and reuse for the community. And so it's a form of social infrastructure that they're looking at. And so this is kind of their design drawings about the reuse of this space. Emmanuel Pratt is kind of one of the lead architects, urban designers in this project, but it's really kind of a community-based project. And so they're working with architects, landscape architects, designers to reimagine spaces and think about how the spaces be built. And so their vision was to take the church, the former church, and they call it a civic arts church. And so using kind of civic activity and kind of community connection and arts as a space. And so they have lots of different kind of design problem solving. You see like down in the basement, they're reusing old materials. They're in the yards doing gardening and farming and doing lots of things that connect people's space and creativity. But this sort of like what used to be kind of a conventional church, they were able to kind of through design, rethink, transform this space into kind of a magnet for the community again. So a way to kind of, again, bring people together and think about how they're kind of keeping and shaping place and really building that connectivity to the neighborhood so that when the young people get of age, like they actually want to come back, right? Like all of these things that are really important things to think about in any type of community, how people stay rooted and connected to their place. And it's an important sort of thing, design as a practice can lead to a lot of negative outcomes. It's always important to remember that design, planning, all of our kind of technical skills can actually be some of those solutions in ways that we have positive outcomes in our communities. But on another note, it is important that we sort of be grounded in our work and thinking about kind of full dimensions of American history. It's a wonderful place in many ways, but it's a complex place in many others. And so, we have to ask every now and again, what do we mean by American? What do we mean by e pluribus unum, out of many one, right? And to really kind of sit with that question. So example here is a way of, thinking about kind of the real full history of the U.S. And this is the Angel Island Immigration Station, which is in San Francisco Bay. It was sort of known as the Ellis Island of the West. So it was a site that served as an immigration port from 1910 to 1940. And it holds important histories and experience of our Asian American communities, also some Russian too, but predominantly Asian American, Southeast Asia and Russia that would come through the western port and not through the eastern port. And so we provided funding for this site to think about how do people learn about the history of immigration in America, the full history of immigration in America, right? Because we have current conversations about immigration. There's a history to it that needs to be understood. And so this is one place that can help us learn and understand and value in a more complete way who we are and our origin stories of our nation and the experiences that have helped shape it. So at this site, it was a place in Angel Island captures this in an incredible way. So it started out very similar to Ellis Island, like people would come in, get processed, and then be able to enter the country. But then there was a shift that happened, and it became essentially an internment site for Asian American people coming into the country. So on the barracks walls, you can find over 200 poems and inscriptions by detainees that were detained on the island. And they were prisoners that were written in Chinese, Japanese, English, and South Asian languages. So these stories inscribed into Angel Island's built environment bring new layers and dimensions to our American heritage and narratives concerning immigration, detainment, identity, humanity, and justice. So this is one of the poems that was inscribed by someone who was detained at Angel Island. It translates to, "Detained in this wooden house for several tens of days, it is all because of the Mexican exclusion law which implicates me. It's a pity heroes have no way of exercising their prowess. I can only await the word so I can snap Zoo's whip. From now on, I am departing far from this building. All of my fellow villagers are rejoicing me. Don't say that everything within is Western styled. Even if it is built of jade, it has turned into a cage." And so, you think about America and like narratives of like who comes to America and Ellis Island and all of that. Like, you probably learned a lot about Ellis Island. You probably didn't learn so much about people coming in the Western Gate and kind of what those real experiences are. And these are people, these are American people. These are American people's stories. And it's important to kind of acknowledge that. So it's challenging work to think about place and everything it has, both positive but also kind of complex. And when we think about the work that we're engaged in at the foundation and with all the communities we work with, it's looking at the important work of our histories that all Americans, whether they're indigenous, immigrant, born and raised, or people that have come anew, have overcome so many different challenges, but it's also what has made America a great nation, right? Kind of envy of the world in so many ways. And so we think about this sort of constantly, what it sort of takes to kind of make our communities better, our experiences better, our places better, our connections better. And there's just so many different layers to that: environmental, social, political, economic, and there are conditions. There's sort of places of calm and there are places of turmoil, and we're just constantly navigating all of those things in our work. So we embrace that. We kind of go ahead into it. It's just like the reality of the world, is that we have to use all of our different tools and knowledge bases and experiences to engage this. And from the perspective of the foundation, we're thinking about how can investment make some type of positive impact in that work. And so central to Humanities in Place, our program area, is to really think about how people and knowledge systems and practices are really engaging ways to do that, and that can actually kind of translate across different places and contexts and geographies. America has so many different contexts, and that's our power in a way, that we have so many different things that we can build and learn from. Because I selected these next few projects because this is a landscape and environmental school, so I'm going to share some of the work that we've done that is explicitly focused on environmental questions and issues. And so one of the themes that we've engaged in our work and all the different kind of fields and kind of movements that we've seen is looking at climate heritage and the environmental humanities and the kind of how that lands in different projects and places. And so our work is really grounded in thinking about the role that heritage and culture have on how people situate themselves in the environment, and that actually some of our cultural ideas and our histories and knowledge can be ways that we think about how we navigate environmental issues, but also things even as large and complex as climate change. And so we're thinking about how the work of mitigating or adapting to the effects of climate shifts or environmental change is important, but also how that can be tools for how we think about adaptation strategies or thinking about how communities actually respond and react to what are these kind of globally challenging conditions. And so, our work as a national funder, we're working across a lot of different types of communities and different types of landscapes. So coastal regions, mountains, deserts, and plains. And so one of the kind of the prompts and people that we're sort of constantly learning from are our indigenous communities. And so we look at that, honoring that kind of long-standing knowledge base and culture as sort of a grounding part of our work, so like background research that we needed to do. And so in a recent visit to New Mexico, we met with Dr. Ted Hohola of the Indigenous Planning and Design Institute down at the University of New Mexico. And he emphasized how relationships, respect, and responsibilities to land as a community are core values that can guide us through different challenges. And so there's this idea in some of these communities that there's a responsibility both to like the past, but also to kind of future generations in terms of stewardship of environment. And that some of the work that you do may not be for right now, that some of the work that you're doing can be for 10, 20 years or 5 generations down the line. And they have a prompt, what they call is place knowing. So I mentioned before kind of place keeping, which is pretty common in the urban planning practices space. They have a prompt of what they call place knowing, which is sort of grounding, sort of an understanding of place that goes further back in history to be able to correctly steward a place. And so building on this idea of place knowing, we've been working with a number of different indigenous communities and folks that are working with, navigating relationships to land and water, spirituality, language, cultural practices, as well as like the social, political, and legal and economic systems that shape how land is used in the world today. And so it's a part of our important frame, but it's also a part of the way that a lot of people are engaging environmental justice concern. So an example of this is the Onondaga, who are also known as the people of the Great Hill or the people of the Central Fire, who are looking to reclaim Maple Bay in Syracuse, New York. And so this is an image of the Onondaga Lake, which is outside of Syracuse in upstate New York. And this was a sacred lake for that community and its kind of deep history, but today it's a polluted lake. It has sewage and toxins, mercury found in all the water, and so it's not able to kind of function in that original way. And so we provided some funding to a group called the American Indian Law Alliance, and so they do work around environmental advocacy and stewardship of these sites to essentially get the lake cleaned up, not just for their people, but for like people, right? It's sort of a wider responsibility, a stewardship that they're taking on to make sure that this lake is cleaned up. But they operate on what was the Haudenosaunee Nation, and for a little back history lesson, we used to call them the Iroquois, but the Haudenosaunee had a form of government that was inspirational to kind of the founding fathers of the U.S. in terms of our form of government for looking at confederacy and how different stakeholders come together. That was how the tribes in upstate New York worked through the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. But these are important kind of histories that are in the site. And these groups are now stewarding this and kind of reclaiming the spaces as they're fighting the legal and environmental justice fights over how to get the pollutants out of the water. They're also doing work of reclaiming those spaces. So it's important that they're doing kind of multiple, we call different types of work. It took different types of work to kind of get the landscape that we have, and there's sort of different types of work that you do to sort of shape or change things. So yes, they're filing for, environmental impact statements and, all of those things, but they're also doing this work, which is to make sure that people, whether they're from the tribes or whether they're from the broader public, the people that live and call that lake home today too, to be connected to different histories and different experiences and different ways to connect to the lake that are very powerful, right? Like show somebody an EIS and their eyes glaze over. You know, instead you like have people come down to the water, have an experience, hear from the people of the original lands, talk about their relationship to water, and you can have a completely different conversation about it. Next up, and again, I'm going all around the country, so moving to our work along the US-Mexico border. And again, like we just know, America's big and complicated, so we're going to all these big and complicated places. So this is the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo binational river, and it's a vital source of water and retreat for local communities. So there's a group in Laredo, Texas on the US side called the Rio Grande National Study Center, also known as RISC. Which works to create physical spaces and programs that allows its residents to foster connection with the river, shed light on Laredo's history, which is both an indigenous, colonial, Mexican, and American history. You have to acknowledge the full span of history, but also the issues that are impacting the different ecosystems there that are affected by climate change, pollution, industrialization, and in this more contemporary cases, the redesign of the US-Mexico border. And so you can actually see, you know, the infrastructure of the border is pretty intense, and its impact on the river and the ecosystem is pretty intense. And so we've provided some support to this group that's looking at how to reconnect the people in both sides of the border community to the river and to what were kind of the original ecosystems and landscapes. And so they're sort of skills, space, kind of training and restoration practices. So they're rebuilding trails and park spaces in what was kind of the border zone. So essentially what happened, you know, they cleared out the entire landscape to build the border wall. And there are these sort of clear areas that allow the spaces to be sort of policed, for lack of a better term, and so it completely destroyed the natural ecosystem of that border zone. And so this group is going through, working with all the different stakeholders to kind of replan and get the ecosystem to kind of work in a more functional way, while still meeting of course, all the different requirements that are needed for the control of the border. And so, this is work that's sort of connecting these sort of very, direct and personal practices. So people literally kind of rebuilding the landscape and ecosystem, but also thinking about, their rights to water, their rights to kind of healthy environments as a part of that work. Working with the city, working with the state and federal government to sort of make sure that the river can be a functional and a positive place, whereas right now, unfortunately, it's a very challenging place and ecosystem. So our environmental heritage work is not just about people. It's also about animals and spirits and all sorts of different things too. And so we say in our work that we really need to engage with all living beings. And so you all know this better than anyone being here in Utah, but before 1800 it was estimated that over 30 million buffalo roamed the plains of North America, and the species have been decimated through many sort of successive waves of extermination, including targeted work by the military, which recognized the buffalo's importance as a nutritional and spiritual force for the kind of the original indigenous communities that were associated with North America. And so the idea of kind of buffalo having an impact on the landscape ecology of much of the United States is something that has to be acknowledged and is something that's been stewarded by various indigenous groups. And so one group that we've been engaged with is the Wind River Tribal Buffalo Initiative. And so they're working to rematriate buffalo to the Wind River Reservation, which is in Wyoming, and that's home to the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes. And so this is our very cool opportunity to kind of visit with the buffalo and this sort of major project to return what was a kind of a keystone species for that landscape and ecology, like sort of nationally, to actually repair the land. A lot of that land had been turned to cattle farming and lots of other sort of intensive uses that were damaging to the ecology in lots of different ways that are sort of not fully understood by all. But they're bringing buffalo back and kind of re-landscaping it in a way that is able to deal with ecological issues, but also for the tribes to be able to keep some of their traditional practices in relationship to land and animals and ecology. And so, just thinking about how our kind of environmental heritage and environmental conversations have to engage other spaces. And sorry for anyone that's vegan here, but these people had a relationship to their environment that is really direct in some ways, and there's a different level of responsibility that comes with it. And there's something certainly to be learned from that, but that some of their cultural practices and histories are something that we can still learn from in terms of how we might think about our relationships to landscapes, environments, and animal life and plant life as well. Sort of in addition to some of the things that we have from our technical and scientific knowledge systems, there are some other knowledge systems that we might pay attention to and engage with as well. And next, probably this is the architecture side more so, but also thinking about within built environment work, how ecological systems and landforms can be sort of also rethought and innovated, and combining and connecting to some of our, what we now consider kind of traditional or contemporary systems. And so we've also supported work that looks literally at built environment work and practices in different ways. So this is a group called the Not Silid Initiative. So they're a collective group in Chinchambito, Dinoshoto, and Kayenta, which are chapters of the Dineta. So it's like Navajo, what we call Navajo Nation, but the Dene people in northern Arizona. And so they had traditional building practices that had just different ways of constructing and thinking. And so they're developing ways to take their traditional building practices and contemporary building technologies and kind of hybridize them so that they can have more sustainable ways of building. And this site, so this is, they're building in very rural areas, so there's not much in terms of services and systems, and so they're having to find ways to kind of build in ways that are economical, but also sustainable for these types of remote environments, and using the hybrid of indigenous practices and contemporary practices to do that. And it's just important work to just think about, do you really need a hard concrete floor for every space, or are there spaces and circumstances where you could have a different pattern and kind of way of doing things? And so, there are places that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, that you would make a floor in a certain way, and you would then care for and maintain a floor in a different way. And what happens when you bring that back? And it goes back to that kind of place knowing kind of prompt that I mentioned earlier, that you can have different practices as a part of your work. But then they're also thinking about, just being resourceful. So again, they're in kind of very rural communities. So they say, like, we've got grass and sheep. We don't have drywall, but we have grass and sheep. So, the idea of getting sort of different building practices to sort of connect and make what is affordable housing that, again, people in that community know how to build and maintain is something that they're looking at. And so the insulating properties of the different materials that they're using are something that they're developing and learning from what were the ancient practices. In a very different context, we've done work in Hawaii, and so the Kuleaino Ula Oahu, or KUA, which is an organization based on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. So they are a community-based organization that works explicitly from kind of a biocultural kind of approach of resource management in the rural Native Hawaiian communities. And so KUA, the organization, means grassroots growing through shared kuleana, or responsibility. So they're thinking about kind of community responsibility as the kind of the tool or instrument of kind of biocultural resource management. And so they're looking at everything from the governance of fisheries that are sort of done by kind of the state government, through to thinking about what they sort of need to teach and kind of communicate to their community and public in different ways to make sure that they can have a more balanced relationship to their environment. And so they have a combination of both kind of very technical things that they're doing, kind of engineering type approaches, but also thinking at their traditional practices for restorative care, and thinking about what they call the Wahipana, which are their kind of cultural historic sites, like their kind of deep memory of like how they would use a place is something that they're kind of connecting with these present day stewardship practices. So they're working with 70 different communities throughout Hawaii to look at environmental conservation and thinking about how their shared knowledge and practices can work. And so there's a different sort of approaches to this. One is focusing on landscape restoration explicitly. Another is looking at the traditional fish pond caretakers who are pictured here, hauling and selling pohaku, which is the kind of the stone like kind of walls that they would build to make and kind of create the fish ponds. But also a third effort, which is really cool. There's a whole like seaweed gathering kind of system that they have that looks at kind of beach and kind of ocean, kind of marine practices as well, and how that relates to the care of the oceans as well. So these three different kind of traditional practices that they're bringing back into their work. And so they do a lot of kind of network sharing, knowledge exchange, but also doing these sort of hands-on and practice-based exchanges with the people that are doing the more contemporary building practices. So it's really interesting and important work, but work that is, again, very, very directly engaged with the local communities. Another group in Hawaii, but in a very different kind of approach, is a group called Hawaii Nonlinear. And so they're looking at the kind of research and knowledge basis on the advancement of Aina, which they call the land that feeds, like the name for Hawaii is Aina, through art and architecture through and across the Hawaiian Islands. And so they're looking at the transformation of built environments with respect to Native Hawaiian culture and the impacts of ecological devastation and injustices that have happened on the islands in many successive years, and thinking about how they do the work to kind of inform and protect the different landscapes. And so they're more in like the research kind of academic space. So they have all these important data and analysis and mapping projects that they're doing across the islands, looking at traditional building practices, important ecological and biocultural features across the landscapes on the island. So they're doing this work of kind of just collecting all this information, making sure that spatial information is available to people so that when projects or policies are being made, that this information is a part of the conversation and part of the knowledge base as well. But they're also doing work of thinking about, again, how to kind of incorporate the kind of traditional Hawaiian, like the native practices with important projects going forward today. So in this map, they're looking at the different icons and things are like different types of stewardship activities, different physical features, such as the fish ponds that I showed, or the taro fields, or they have these kind of indigenous forests, kind of agroforestry, their version of like agroforestry that they had traditionally that would have been mapped and understood by the original peoples, where those sort of zones were that would have been stewarded by people. So they've mapped all of these to be an important kind of resource for lots of different people working across the island. So the last stretch of my talk here is looking at what we consider kind of networks and systems practices, so not kind of individual sites or projects, but people that are working in networks to advance change, built environment change, but through this idea of kind of human connection and kind of rootedness to place. So first example is the Climate Heritage Network, and so this is a big giant group of over 250 government agencies, NGOs, universities, businesses, and other organizations that understand that the arts, culture, heritage, kind of knowledge systems are integral to facing challenges of climate change. And so through both international and place-specific wins, the network is mobilizing the gap between people who are doing kind of that big climate policy work, think, Paris Accord and whatever they do at the UN, which is nobody understands that stuff really, to, people working like on the ground. They're like, my basement is flooding, right? Like they're really trying to do the work to bridge those connections and find that link between local solutions and kind of some of the big policies that are being promoted in different places. And they're working just in so many different contexts. They're working, for example, on the U.S.-Mexico border. You could see the wall there, but because that artificial human political border is there, you can see the ecosystem is like, what is happening, right? And so how do you kind of navigate the real challenges that are facing some of these communities through shared knowledge exchange and networking in these spaces? And then, why I'm here in Utah is another example of that. And so this example from right here in Utah. So we've been in collaboration with Epicenter, which is based down in Green River, population 887, to support networks nationwide that are working on rural and remote communities that are doing place-based work around how to invest in some of the communities that have seen a lot of challenges with development and have been left behind by so many different forces and pressures. And so Epicenter has been based in Green River for over a decade, and this is kind of an old vacant building that they've sort of brought back to life, and it's sort of an anchor point for the community in that space. And they're a key partner in something called the Citizens Institute of Rural Design. And so TBD Studio, it's an architecture firm, sort of like a technical consultant on that project for the Citizens Institute of Rural Design. And they work with small communities all across the country to think about how to reimagine, revitalize their communities and spaces and find the solutions that, what works in a larger city is not going to work in these cities, right? It's just everything is so different in terms of funding, in terms of politics, in terms of the actual environmental conditions. And so they're developing what are the solutions and kind of knowledge exchanges that really are important for those smaller communities. And so this is a project, so they're building new affordable housing. So the big issue is young people in the smaller communities don't really have a place to go unless it's like, literally like a trailer type home or something. And so they're building housing that can help sort of keep and maintain some of the population. We were laughing at them because when, so in their renderings, back when this project was still on the boards, they had the ATV in the street. I was like, what is this? We can go there, and like we would go to visit, and it's like it's literally on the street. So, but it's wonderful that they're doing work to say, okay, this is what works for our communities, and building the kind of the design and planning solutions there. But they're also thinking about what do the communities need that they didn't have, and so in addition to building the housing and all the there is so much space here, y'all. In the space they say, well, we really do need public spaces in our community, and so as a part of building that housing development, they took plenty available land and have built this wonderful park and public space. So again, that the people that are there have the sort of the amenities, the connections, the spaces and experiences that are there. And they work with lots of different people. They work with artists and poets and people who can cook and all these different things to literally have a space in these towns and communities that allow people to kind of have a connection to that place that wouldn't exist otherwise. And they built this wonderful, on that site was like a city-owned site, and there used to be a water tower there that had to get demolished. And so as a part of the features in the park, they kind of recreated that water tower just as a place for kind of rest and respite and community, and work with local artists to incorporate things that were special to that place. So you see I guess they have watermelons there or whatever. So the watermelon and the kind of the cattle, and just making that something that is of that place. So that's my talk. And just to wrap up, I'll say that, we've been engaging, as you saw, so many different types of people, places, communities, contexts, but the work is really the same. No matter who and where you are, people have a good place. in the end. And there's a lot of the work that we do in all these different built environment fields to make and connect with that, but it's challenging work sometimes, but it's also really important to kind of ground yourself that we can keep and shape our places in ways that are for the better and not for the worse. So thank you.
We have time for a couple of questions for Justin, if anyone has any. Benji?
So you said Green River population 800 it's something. How is less than 1,000 people enough of people to occupy all the jobs in Green River?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Green River is very interesting. So it's one of the towns that, they have more hotel rooms than people because like the local economy there, like there are nearby parks and other things. So there is, believe it or not, like enough kind of economy there from, frankly, tourism. And there's a whole other rabbit hole to go down with shifts in mining and resource that had cycled through and are potentially coming back with other conversations around mining and extraction in southern Utah. But the town had struggled. A lot of the buildings are vacant. And so they're building the new housing. It wasn't a paradigm of like growth, like, if you build it, they will come. It was a very intentional like engagement conversation that they had with people from that community, from people that had left that community and said, what do we actually need as a kind of infrastructure and resource here? And so then they did the very hard work, and if we ever go into like urban planning, like for real, or economic development, community development, they had to do what's called the capital stack. So they had to go and get a little bit of money from lots of different sources in order to build that housing, right? They had to get some money from the state to do the sidewalk and some money from federal government to, be able to get the rent, the math to work out. So when they built the housing, that it was affordable to people that aren't tourists going to, the parks. So there is an economy there, but you have to do the really very site and place specific work to say, okay, what are the issues in this place? What are the things that work? What are the things that don't work? And then start to kind of problem solve for the gap. And that gap is often coming from all these different sources. So it can be from, public funding sources like, local, state, federal funding. I guess Green River, I don't know the name of the county, I forget it, but Green River is like way on the other side of the county from wherever the population center is. So the county doesn't really give them money because they're like out of sight, out of mind. So they have to get their money from like the state or even federal government before they can get it from their local government. So they do that work to kind of build out something that can be viable. And then the hope or the promise is that then if they can keep enough people in the community that then they can get a tax base. As Mayor is saying, this is the first time that they had essentially a property tax to provide for, being able to pave that street, for example. So it's a challenge that a lot of smaller communities go through is like finding what's the right size between the population, being able to serve a population. What is your relationship to like the county and or state in terms of making the numbers work?
Any other questions? We could do one or two quick ones if we want. Todd.
Wonderful work, Justin. It's great to have you here. A lot of students look at a presentation like this and they go, how can we participate in this kind of thing? And so my question to you is, as part of your networks, the networks component of your strategy, is there a history of relationships with academic departments like ours? How can we help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I have two answers to that. So one is, if you all are interested in built environment, you probably want to do something directly, I'm going to guess. And so very often, like the best place to start is like literally like at home, like a place that you like know and are rooted and connected to very well, or through kind of your existing affiliations and institutions, right? So universities have kind of an instrument for doing that, but there may be things in your own kind of community place that you can like literally like get civically engaged and involved in a place that you know and care about is a really important step. And there's a lot that you can learn by doing that. You know, in my personal professional career, you know, yes, I worked in city government, I worked for big firms and all of these sorts of things, and was able to advance my career that way, but my knowledge base advanced just as much through work that I was doing for my own personal interest, enjoyment, and things that I cared about, and so tended to like do well at them because I cared about them. And that became a part of my professional body of knowledge that advanced my career in other ways. So starting at home is one really important thing that you can do, and it could be with your friends and family, it could be the community that you live, and just starting that way is very, very important. But in terms of kind of more direct work and, you know, university partnerships, we have a number of projects and organizations that we've supported that are with universities. It can be tricky because of, they call town gown, you know, relationships with universities can sometimes be complex, but there are a lot of really wonderful kind of technical assistance type programs that universities are really good at doing. And so the Citizens Institute of Rural Design that I mentioned, for example, they often are working with kind of local university partners to kind of supplement work, doing charrettes, community engagement, those types of projects, certainly. But sometimes the universities can be like major partners. Not the Hill District exemplary group, but there's another project in Pittsburgh Hill District where University of Pittsburgh is actually an anchor tenant for community projects. So the university has enough money that, you know, we're going to create this space, but we can't afford it ourselves. But the university, you know, university can afford to do more than this grassroots community group does, and so they actually share space, and the university was able to kind of support in that way as well. So there are a lot of opportunities, and it's just a matter of having a good kind of trust dynamic between, let's say, an institutional partner and a community partner. But if that work is there, it can be really, really powerful and instrumental. But we have several projects. Montana State, they have the Indigenous Food Labs. They have a whole program around Indigenous food culture and research. It's like happening in the university that is in partnership with a wide range of kind of community-based organizations all across Montana. And so the university is able to, you know, write the grants and, you know, do all this stuff that these small community groups can't do, but they're an important infrastructure for that work happening. So universities have a really key role, so long as the relationship is a trustful one. Oh.